as we get started, I'd like to invite you to put your name in the chat and what comes to mind when you hear the word well-being.
How come you haven't found God yet? Don't you want the story?
Okay, so welcome everyone. As you come in, we're asking people to introduce themselves and please tell us what comes to mind when you hear the word well-being. Thank you, Katie. She's talking about mental health. Other folks, what comes to mind when you hear the term well-being? Oh, balance. Thank you, Laura. Access to adequate amounts of quality healthcare, nutrition, mental health, healthcare access. Bob, serenity, all needs are met. I like that. Mentally, physically, and emotionally well. Okay. For some reason, when I think about that, I oftentimes think about the word that comes to my mind is often peacefulness. We'll take a couple of minutes more as people come in. And again, if you just joined us, we're asking you to put your name in the chat and what comes to mind when you hear the word well-being. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to provide a little background on the rural poll, and then we'll go over the results from the 2025 rural poll and have some opportunity to talk about the results. And Beth Nacke will join us to provide some commentary on the results of the rural poll. And unfortunately, I am in the student union and some noisy group just broke for lunch in the quiet spot I thought I found. So we'll get started with the roll poll. You want to advance the slides, Becky?
Is it not advancing? It is
Nope.
online.
We're seeing the same thing.
All right. Oh, I think I was sharing that on the. You see now, as you're seeing the team members?
Yep. So this is our team, the roll poll team, and this is our 30th year of doing the roll poll. You can see we have folks from leadership, education, communication, agricultural economics, and rural prosperity, Nebraska. Next slide. So just a little bit about the roll poll. As I said, this is our 30th anniversary. And each year we ask a certain set of questions so we can look at the difference in how people answer those questions over time. And then each year we add some questions, either questions that people have requested or questions that reflect some of the issues of the day. So here are some of the core topics around community, perceptions of community change, satisfaction with community services, attachment to community, whether people feel like they're better or worse off 5 years ago and 10 years from now, feelings of powerlessness and satisfaction with different aspects of their life. And then we always collect demographics so we can look at which sectors of the population are most likely to have a certain type of answer to the question. So like I said, we rotate topics. So in 2021, we looked at trust and confidence in institutions and the impacts of the pandemic. In 2022, we looked at natural resource management, water, leadership and volunteering in communities, workplace and economy. 23, civil discourse, childcare, farm bill. Civil discourse, we ask again in 24, economy and trade, artificial intelligence and housing, because that was a big issue, or still is, in Nebraska. And this last one, we again ask about trust in institutions. We ask about algorithms, biosecurity and bioeconomy, and energy resources and agriculture. So if you have any questions about the how we do the roll poll, you can unmute and ask them. We basically, this is a mail survey, so we use the tried and true mail survey process of sending a letter or postcard, letting people know it's coming, sending them the survey, then sending them a reminder, then sending them the survey again. We also offer people an opportunity to complete it online, and more people take advantage of that opportunity, which makes it easier for us to do the analysis. Next slide. So we do have some questions, and we want to know how different parts of Nebraska answer those questions. So these are basically our regions: Panhandle, North Central, Northeast, South Central, Southeast. We do not collect data from the Lincoln and Omaha counties. And even though the two orange areas are part of metropolitan or micro metropolitan areas, we have kept them in the poll because we started with the poll with those counties in them. So we continue to include those. Next slide. So what are our results on trends in well-being? So first question, all things considered, do you think you're better or worse off than you were 5 years ago? And what you can see here is that people think they're way better off. So what do you think's going on there? Anybody want to think about what's going on there? So when we first looked at that, I thought, oh, I don't know that people in Nebraska feel all that much better than they did last year. But the question is about 5 years ago, and 5 years ago, the poll went out at the height of the pandemic. So people were just getting locked down, and most of them that thought about the question and thought about 2020 are definitely said they're better off. Okay, next slide. So all things considered, do you think you will be better or worse off 10 years from today? So that's kind of asking the question about the future. And this year, rural Nebraskans are more optimistic about their future than they were last year. You can see the lines for better off. about the same and worse. And a lot less people think they're going to be worse off. That middle went down a little bit, but the better off went up. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like in this coming year's poll. Next slide. So we want to dive into this question a little bit, and younger persons are more likely than older persons to believe they will be better off in the next 10 years. So you can see here that 24% of 65 and older think they'll be better off, but 63% think they'll be better off than 19 to 29 area. Okay. So we also ask about powerlessness because that's often associated with well-being. So the question was, life has changed so much in our modern world that most people are powerless to control their own lives. And what did rural Nebraskans say about that? This year, fewer rural Nebraskans agree with the statement that people are powerless to control their own lives as compared to last year. So this is a similar kind of set of trend lines as the well-being. Self-evaluation of mental health. Most rural Nebraskans describe mental health or emotional well-being as good, 52%, or excellent, 34%. The proportion rating their mental health as excellent is higher than it's been in the past 2 years, increasing from 27% to 34%. And I just wanted to point out here, we were talking about, here for poor and only fair, but poor, we're looking at only 1%, 4%, and 3%. Nationally, 23.4% of adults experience mental illness. So seems like there are issues around mental health in rural Nebraska, but in some ways, maybe we're better off. Next slide. So we looked at mental health and occupation. So persons with healthcare support or public safety occupations are more likely than persons in other occupations to rate their mental health as emotional well-being as excellent. Almost 4 in 10 persons with construction, installation, maintenance occupations rate their mental health as only fair. So you can see the differences here. Healthcare is definitely a place where people rate their mental health better than some other occupations. Feelings of loneliness. A slight majority of rural Nebraskans say they hardly ever or never experience feelings of loneliness. So you can see that there. And we wanted to look at that by age, and you can see here that the younger the respondent, the more likely they are to say they have experienced loneliness often, up until we get to that 50-64, and then it goes back up again. Next slide. So I did look at the national statistics on loneliness, and you can see daily loneliness edges up to 20% of US adults, and those experiencing loneliness are there's a correlation between those and the people who are not optimistic about their future. So that's kind of an interesting juxtaposition of national versus state. The questions are asked slightly different, so it's not an exact match, but it does give us a sense of the fact that loneliness has become a national problem. Next slide. So again, we're the longest running rural poll in the United States. We do this annually. We ask questions about different kinds of questions from year to year, and we're very open to taking your suggestions about what kind of questions you think should be in our next poll. We'll be finalizing that survey in January and February. You can also check our website. We'll be doing a webinar on the results of energy resources in agriculture, biosecurity and bioeconomy, algorithms and community coming up in the next couple of months. And in the next couple of months, those reports will also be online at the Rural Poll site. So what do folks think? Any reactions or questions initially? And we can stop sharing the screen and see who, everybody can see who's here. Any questions about it? Beth, do you want to take over with some comments?
Yeah, I sure can. Uh, so I have lots of thoughts. My first thought that I have, and it's just a question for you when we look at this um, improvement from last year to this year, what's the trend look like over the past 30 years of um, response during an election year? Because does that play into how people were feeling last year? It's just a substantial amount of negative um, messaging that's you know, that you're kind of bombarded with during. So I wonder what does that look like over time? Is that a trend where it dips and we come back up after we're out of all of those ads? Just a thought I was having. um
Yeah, and I haven't looked at that. Becky, do you have a comment on that?
I'm sorry, I missed the exact question. I know. I was sorry. I was
She's
typing.
she's wondering if it's common for the sense of well-being to decline in during election years.
I don't know that we've seen it necessarily decline, but I think it does change. And I think given the political affiliations of most of rural Nebraska, we've seen changes. So when a Republican administration is coming in, then sometimes we see that bump up, whereas 4 year or when the Democratic leadership happened, I think of course that was also conflated with, the onset of COVID as well. So yeah, kind of hard to really tell that, but I don't know that we've seen that consistently over time. But I think it certainly can depend, like I said, on maybe who's coming into office too.
And I think last year the economic issues were really dominant and the farm economy issues were really dominant. So I think that might have played a key role in how people were feeling about things. Because people like to look back to 2019 as being really great, although if you look back to 2019, was it really that great? So go ahead.
uh I guess so I'm reflecting on slide 13, the evaluation of mental health by occupation, because ideally what we would want to see is in that purple or yellow area, right, that we're good or excellent in response. And so what are the factors that are in that production, transportation, warehousing, construction, sales, off support? What is driving their higher? I mean, that those are production, warehousing, sales, and off support were the only two categories that had ratings of poor. Right? So what are the factors that are influencing that? Who's working within extension? Who's working with individuals in those areas, and what are we doing to address what's happening there? I'm also wondering, of those who are reporting good or excellent mental health, what is the percentage of those respondents that have regular access to mental health practitioners? Does that influence? Like, these are just questions that have what's influencing that higher self-report on their mental well-being.
And I don't know the answers to that. I'd be interested in thoughts of other people. What is it about production and transportation that would influence mental health? I know with when you're talking about transportation, a lot of those schedules are really crazy. So, and we know that people who work work more hours and people that have schedules that change sometimes have more challenges with mental health. But other folks, any thoughts about that? Ask some good questions. In terms of access to mental health, um, probably those folks who have employer healthcare would probably be more likely to have access in construction and some transportation and some production. Those workers could be temporary, or they could move from job to job and not have that access to insurance. But that's definitely something to look into.
So in answer to your question too, Mary, you asked me when we first jumped on here, you know, who needs to know this information? I think it's all of us. We all need to be aware of that, because even if you're not working with a specific audience, you know, even if you're not working in ag, if you're living in a rural community, you're ag adjacent. And I think that's the other piece of it, things that we've talked about in other conversations about mental health and the things that we're doing within extension. A lot of what the discussion is around um, how those who are in agriculture are faring with their mental well-being. And when we think about the rural community, and if we're only speaking about agriculture and our in those individuals in the rural community, we're leaving out a huge portion of that rural community who live in a rural community but are not in the agricultural sector, right? And so um, I'm aware of that in having conversations with partners or meeting with people, that how we speak about rural health and well-being, not just being focused on those who are working in agriculture. Um, so it's all of us. We all need to be aware of this, and all need to be aware of what are the resources. Because if we have people who are rating their mental well-being as poor, what are we doing? If we're identifying that issue, what are we doing with that information? Are we providing resources within the community? Are we following up with individuals if they respond? How many of us are trained in QPRs that can recognize those signs of maybe somebody in crisis? So those are the thoughts that I was having as I was reviewing the slides.
And Nebraska does have a really high suicide rate. It's got kind of a unique profile. I think the highest um, group that's at risk is men that are in like 45 to 65. So mental health is clearly a problem in rural Nebraska. This data helps us understand people's perceptions about their mental health. We could possibly ask some questions next year around access to mental health resources.
I think that would be good to know, so that some of the work that we're doing within like the rural health team, we're a small team, there's two of us, but that some of the work that we're doing is to identify who all those partners are, what's everyone doing, and how do we have a cohesive approach to how we're addressing that. So we have a work group that meets monthly that's just focused on mental health and well-being. If that's something that you're interested in being a part of, you can reach out to me. I can add you to those meetings. A lot of that conversation initially started with Quinn Lewandowski at the Public Policy Center. He holds the CDC grant for suicide prevention for the state of Nebraska. And so if you haven't seen any of those materials, please let me know, because we have co-branded materials that came from Quinn also. on recognizing the symptoms. All of those materials are tailored to our rural population because the rate is exponentially higher in our rural communities and so that the target for that campaign is men 18 to 65. I mean, it's a broad range, but I think some of that thought process is also if we can identify some of these issues early in life, we can help that trajectory, of having a longer term period of feeling like you're a satisfaction in your life and that you're a state of well-being.
People have some questions, comments? Where do you think we need to send the report? Who else needs to know about this? What do you see communities doing about loneliness, increasing access to mental health? What are some possibilities out there? Thoughts?
As I say, we do have a question from Joe in the chat, and he asked about, is a survey conducted during the same time of year every year? And is there any data on how long of a period is within the scope when people consider their situation now? For example, if people are not receiving the survey again until next July, are we going to see a difference in answers based on the government shutdown and how it's affecting families right now? Or are they likely to just consider the beginning of 2026? I can answer the first part for you is for Joe is we do conduct the survey about the same time every year. However, last year was we were a bit delayed getting into the field due to some unforeseen circumstances. So we typically mail in the spring, like March and April. Last year it went out more the beginning part of the summer. But Mary, I don't know if you have any thoughts about what you think people consider, what time frame when they're answering these questions. If we will see any things like if the government shutdown ends soon, will that be out of people's minds and they won't think about that when they're answering the question next year? Or do you think those types of things stay with them longer than that?
That's a good question. I think if we ask the question in March, they may remember that. If we ask the question a little later, probably the issues around the 26th election will be more on their mind when they think about government. But we did add some questions around trust in institutions, and we'll probably do that again this year. I think that's where you'll see people thinking about the shutdown when they say, do I trust the Senate? Do I trust the House of Representatives? Do I trust the executive branch? And those numbers have typically gone down, or at least recently gone down, which is true nationally as well. I think with the shutdown there, if we ask the question now, the people's trust would be really, really low, particularly with the healthcare issues and this SNAP shutting down. So there, people respond to other people being in crisis. So we have somebody saying, have you thought about asking a question around having the feeling of being needed or neededness? I think that's an interesting way to see if people feel needed rather than they feel helpless. I think that's a wonderful idea because when we look at how attached am I to a community, or do I feel like I belong in the community, people often tell me they know they belong in a community if they did something that matters. So I like that idea. Other thoughts, people? What are some other things, other ways we can use this data? What are some other ways, other folks who need to know about it? What can we do with it?
I do have one thought to kind of piggyback off of that previous comment. Do we ask about like civic engagement and volunteering? And is there a way to look at like those that volunteer and are more civically engaged and kind of tie that, or look if there's an association with that mental health? Because I would just be curious, and I don't know if there's questions about like, do you volunteer or things like that within the rural poll?
Becky, that goes to you.
Yeah, we have asked that in the past, but I don't remember the last time. It's been a number of years. So it would be interesting though, to go back and look at when we asked that and see what relationships there are with well-being. That's a good question.
And that gives us a wonderful segue to remind people that the rural poll data is available in the All Things Nebraska website, and you can go to the rural poll site on All Things Nebraska, and you can select the year of data you want to look at, and you can select the question you want to look at, and it will print a little report for you on the specific thing you're interested in. Well, it won't print it. It will structure a little report for you that you can print. Other questions, comments? So we have, I think volunteer engagement is a great question in a world that feels more isolating due to streaming and social media. I'm finding at the food bank that many pantry partners in Western Nebraska have a really hard time finding volunteers. Yeah. We had some conversation about that the other day, and also with kids' sports and people working two jobs and all of those things. The flexibility of volunteers seems to be true of fewer people these days. Other questions? You have any more comments? Well, hearing none, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to encourage you to look at the rural poll report. If there are specific things you want to look at, the data for 2025, I think will be in All Things Nebraska in January, Becky?
The data is already for each
Okay.
report. After the report is released, we try to have it about simultaneously, that topic also available in All Things Nebraska. And it looked like Jordan had posted a link to that specific report.
So you can go in and
Yeah.
play around with this data if
Mhm.
you would like to see what else you can learn. And we urge you to do that.